Welcome to the debate. So imagine stepping onto like a crowded, dimly lit dance floor. The salsa music kicks in, you lock eyes, and you take the hands of a complete stranger.
Right. And if you've ever been in that exact situation, you know that sudden rush of adrenaline.
Oh, absolutely. The question is, do you need a rigid, memorized script of patterns to survive the next 3 minutes? Or do you need a, flexible, modular vocabulary to actually hold a kinetic conversation?
It really is the ultimate test of preparation because you either know how to navigate the chaos or you just freeze.
Precisely. And today we're unpacking a massive pedagogical divide in the Afro Latin dance world. We're looking specifically at the most effective approach to teaching complex partner dances like salsa, bachata, zouk, and kizomba.
We are examining two fundamentally different philosophies here. So on one side, we have the traditional method of teaching fixed, long dance choreographies, which is honestly the way most of us probably learned.
Yeah, definitely. And on the other side, there's this radical deconstruction known as the Dance Lenga modular method. It basically breaks these dances down into interchangeable foundational elements.
And this tension emerges directly from two really fascinating source texts we're digging into today: the Dance Lenga offline manual and the Blue Ocean strategy for Dance Lenga.
Right. And I will be representing the perspective that the modular Dance Lenga method accelerates true improvisational skill, musical agility, and crucial long-term retention.
And I'll be arguing that traditional fixed pattern instruction provides essential structure, a necessary holistic cultural flow, and a much faster, more practical application for dancers who actually just want to survive and have fun on the social floor.
Let's lay out the core of these positions, because the reality of Afro-Latin social dancing, as explicitly detailed in the text, is that it is fundamentally improvisational.
Right.
They sometimes refer to it as a promiscuous dance style.
Exactly. You can step onto a floor in Tokyo, Berlin, or Bogota with someone you've literally never met and dance brilliantly together, provided, you speak the same kinetic language. The music comes first and the dance is merely a physical interpretation of it.
But you're going to argue that the traditional studio model doesn't reflect that. I mean, it completely fails to reflect it. Instructors teach long, rigid choreographies with internationally standardized elements. They treat the actual music playing in the background merely as a metronome, just to keep time.
That's a bit harsh.
But it's true. It is exactly like teaching someone a script for a play when the reality of the social floor demands improv comedy. And the Dance Lenga method solves this by introducing, aggressive modularity.
And by modularity, you mean basically tearing the dance down to its studs.
Yes, exactly that. It breaks down these long, unwieldy patterns into what they call danse elementen, or dance elements, which are usually just 2 8 counts long.
Okay, so very short blocks.
Right, and the pedagogical focus shifts entirely to the transitions between these blocks, utilizing a literal cut-and-paste methodology. By mastering the transitions, which the text calls the secret sauce of the system, dancers build this exponential database of moves.
Sure, but
Leaders learn to genuinely improvise on the fly, and followers are actually forced to stop anticipating the next move because, there is no memorized sequence to rely on. It finally reflects the reality of the social floor.
okay, right, but we have to look at how human beings actually learn a physical skill. The traditional method of teaching long, fixed patterns isn't some archaic mistake. It is a proven, highly effective pedagogical tool.
Is it, though?
Yes, it provides crucial context, muscle memory, and most importantly, an immediate sense of accomplishment. Even the Blue Ocean text explicitly admits that the Dance Lenga method is een stuk langzamer, which means a lot slower than regular courses.
Well, yes, slower in the short term, maybe.
But that short term is when you hook the student. Think about a traditional class. A student can learn 6 to 7 elements in a single hour. By the end of that hour, they can immediately execute a full, fluid sequence. They feel like dancers tonight.
I get the appeal of the illusion.
It's not an illusion. And furthermore, there is a deep historical precedent here that we just cannot ignore. The text highlights how June Liberta worked with Eddie Torres to standardize long sequences into the Mambo syllabus.
Right, the Palladium era stuff.
Exactly. They took the wild, improvisational energy of New York's Palladium era and codified it into long, teachable 8-count structures. That standardization was the very foundation that built the global Afro Latin dance industry.
I mean, no one is denying Eddie Torres's impact.
So deconstructing these deeply cultural dances into isolated clinical blocks risks losing the immediate joy, the momentum, and the holistic cultural context of the art form.
I hear the argument about immediate joy and feeling like a dancer on night one. But let's look at the actual retention data. You mentioned that a student can learn 6 to 7 elements in an hour using the traditional method.
Yep, easily.
But what is the actual depth of that retention? Teaching a long traditional choreography is like teaching someone to recite a speech phonetically in a foreign language.
Oh, come on. It's not that shallow.
It is. Sure, they sound fluent for about 3 minutes, but ask them a question off script and they completely freeze. They can't have a real conversation. The source material points out a staggering psychological fact regarding this. If students don't actively practice, they forget what they've learned within 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
20 minutes. The information simply seeps out of their short-term memory as soon as they leave the studio. Dance Lenga purposely sacrifices that illusion of immediate speed for actual neurological retention.
But you have to acknowledge the frustration factor of that sacrificed speed. I mean, let's look at how Lenga actually operates mechanically. The method dictates that if a student wants to learn a level 4 dynamic element, say a complex double spin that ends in a hand toss.
A great move, yeah.
Sure, but the instructor shouldn't just teach them that move. Instead, they are forced through this incremental progression. First, they have to dance a level 2 version, maybe just a basic inside turn.
Right, establishing the base.
Then they must master a level 3 version, like a single spin with a different handhold. Only then do they get to the level 4 version. If I go to a dance class on a Tuesday night after a long, exhausting day at work, and I just want to learn a cool salsa combination to use this weekend,
You want the instant gratification.
I want a usable sequence. Being forced through a rigid, incremental progression might completely alienate me. The traditional method gives me a complete, usable framework right now.
A usable framework? I mean, the problem is that the traditional method doesn't actually give you a usable framework. It gives you a fragile sequence that shatters the exact moment the music shifts unexpectedly or your partner makes a slight mistake.
It doesn't shatter, you just adjust.
But they don't know how to adjust because they don't know the transitions. You say Lenga is frustrating, but think about how Lenga actually cements memory to prevent the ultimate frustration of forgetting everything. They use what they call loops.
Right, the looping drills.
Yes, and the mechanics of a loop are brilliant. A mini module is created by taking that complex element you mentioned and attaching a simple static beginning and a simple static end to it.
And then they just drill it.
Exactly. The couple must dance that specific loop perfectly 8 times in a row. Every single time they make a mistake, they must reset to 0.
Which sounds exhausting.
It's intense, yes, but this repetition physically cements the transition, the entry and exit points of the move, into procedural memory. Yes, it takes longer in that specific Tuesday night class, but their overall journey to mastery is actually accelerated because they aren't constantly relearning forgotten complex choreographies every single week.
Well, that relies entirely on the assumption that the student sticks around long enough to see that long-term benefit.
They will if they feel they are actually learning.
But the confidence a beginner gets from completing a full 6-element sequence in their first hour, that is the emotional hook that brings them back to the studio next week. If you strip that away, you need another way to keep them engaged, which brings up my biggest concern with the Lenga methodology.
Let me guess. The gamification?
Yes, Lenga relies heavily on gamification to mask the slow pacing.
It does rely on gamification, and honestly, it's an incredibly effective strategy for adult learners. The text references the Super Mario effect, which is a concept drawn from Mark Rober's research.
Right, the whole video game analogy.
Exactly. It shows that if you frame learning as a game, where failure has no real penalty, just like falling into a pit in Super Mario just means you try the level again, it drastically increases a student's success rate and their willingness to attempt difficult things.
I understand the theory, but
By reframing the learning process, introducing variables like switching roles between leader and follower,
dancing blindfolded, or applying the Maya principle.
Wait, explain how the Maya principle actually works on the floor, though.
Oh, sure. Maya stands for most advanced yet acceptable. It means the instructor pushes the student to the absolute edge of their current competence without pushing them into a state of panic.
Okay.
So if a student can handle a single spin perfectly, you don't just jump to a triple spin. You add a subtle change in hand placement to keep it novel, but acceptable. By doing this, you remove the emotional barrier to adult learning. You make it a game of kinetic exploration rather than a stressful test of physical competence.
That sounds very modern and progressive, but let me explain why turning this into a game is problematic. You are taking a deeply social, historically rich, empathetic art form and turning it into a clinical video game.
That's a bit of an exaggeration.
Is it? The source material literally reduces human connection to an algebraic equation.
Oh, you mean the formula for the modules?
Yes, it literally defines the cut and paste modularity as, in quote, A times, open bracket, comma, less than, begin, times handling, times end, greater than, comma, close bracket.
Okay, hearing it read aloud like that is funny. But
I mean, A times begin times handling times end. That isn't dance. That is calculus. The handling is the action, and you just bracket it with an entry and an exit.
it's just a structural representation.
But when you reduce partner connection to a formula, and you heavily focus on scores, rankings, and dance battles, which the text explicitly suggests for engaging competitive students, you strip away the absolute soul of the dance.
I disagree completely.
Afro Latin dance is about nonverbal communication, it's about empathy, it's about feeling the syncopation of the music together. It is not about unlocking an achievement badge for executing a level 4 spin sequence.
Look, I get the hesitation regarding the math equation, but let's be clear about who that formula is for. The text is very explicit that empathy and etiquette are the core red threads running through the entire Lenga system.
It says that, yes.
And it practices it. The gamification, the scores, and the Super Mario effect are purely pedagogical tools designed to overcome the sheer terror of failure that most adults feel on a dance floor. They are not replacements for the art form's soul.
But they center the ego instead of the partnership.
Not at all. In fact, Lenga argues that the traditional method, where a male instructor typically dictates the entire choreography and the follower is just expected to passively execute it, is what truly lacks empathy.
Well, because the follower isn't contributing to the creation of the dance in that moment.
Exactly. Lenga actively encourages switch dance, where leaders and followers swap roles to truly understand each other's kinetic experience. That builds profound empathy. You literally feel the imbalance you are causing your partner.
I'll grant that switch dancing builds empathy.
Thank you. And as for the algebra you mentioned, that formula, it is for the instructor's structural understanding, not the student's soul. It allows the teacher to see exactly where a module can be safely separated and reattached without breaking the physics of the dance. It's the architectural blueprint that allows a beautiful, expressive building to stand safely.
Right, you're giving them a dictionary. But Afro-Latin dance is jazz.
Okay.
You can't just play technically correct notes based on a structural understanding of scales. The swing, the momentum, and the history are what make it jazz. And that history is built on musicality and cultural integrity. Now, I know the Lenga method claims to prioritize musicality.
It fundamentally centers it. Traditional classes usually just play a song as background noise to keep the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 beat, while students execute a sequence blindly, ignoring the horns, ignoring the percussion.
Some bad classes do that, yes.
Most do. But Lenga utilizes a choreo template. They meticulously analyze the structure of a song, the intro, the verses, the chorus, the instrumental breaks.
Right.
And they map the dance modules to those specific emotional shifts in the music. If there's an 8-count break in the music, they don't just mechanically dance through it. They apply a static pose or a specific footwork shine. They are teaching students to be what the text calls musicalists, dancers who interpret the music in real time.
I agree that mapping to the chorus and verse is fantastic. I really do. But look at how extreme modularity threatens the cultural essence of these dances.
How so?
The text introduces this concept of eclectic dancing, where you deliberately decouple the dance from its traditional music. It literally suggests taking a salsa on one module, keeping that quick, slow timing, but dancing it to a reggaeton track, or swapping to a house music beat.
Which is incredibly fun and challenges timing.
Sure, but furthermore, to make these modules fit together perfectly like Lego bricks, the text notes that Lenga modules are deliberately taught clean.
Yes, stripped of the original styling.
Exactly. They strip away the original styling, the body movement, the specific flavor, to leave just the raw, sanitized mechanics. But in Afro Latin dance, the styling isn't just a post-production special effect you slap on at the end.
It can be layered on later.
No, the styling is the dance. The way a Cuban dancer moves her torso in casino, or the specific grounded hip movement in Dominican bachata, that is the cultural context. If you strip that away to create a universal kinetic language, and then start dancing salsa steps to reggaeton music, you are diluting rich, distinct histories into a generic, homogenized soup.
I completely understand the protective instinct over the culture. I do. But let's examine how and why clean teaching achieves something far larger. The goal of the dance lenga method, as stated in its philosophy, is a universal dance language.
A universal language, right.
In fact, lenga translates to language in papiamentu, the Creole language spoken in the Dutch Caribbean. The purpose isn't to erase culture. It's to build a bridge across societal polarization and loneliness using movement. By initially stripping the styling, you achieve ultimate inclusivity.
Honestly, I'm struggling to see how stripping cultural identity creates inclusivity.
Because it allows you to adapt the core mechanics to absolutely any human body. If you are listening to this, think about the physical demands of traditional styling. The text gives a brilliant case study of a wheelchair dancer.
Oh, right. The accessibility section.
Yes, if you teach a strict, culturally rigid, full-body styling salsa sequence, a person in a wheelchair or a senior citizen with limited mobility is entirely excluded from the room.
That is true.
But because lenga isolates the action from the footwork, an instructor can analyze the kinetic range of a wheelchair user and seamlessly replace a rapid footwork module with a torso rotation module.
That's fascinating.
It is. This allows the wheelchair user to perfectly match the 8 count of the music and dance with a standing partner without needing to execute a traditional cross-body lead. Once those foundational mechanics are mastered, the lenga text explicitly states the ultimate goal is for dancers to find true freedom and add their own sauce or personal expression back into the framework.
Look, making dance accessible to a wheelchair user or a senior citizen is undeniably vital, and that adaptation is brilliant. I can see that.
Thank you. But for the vast majority of your able-bodied students, if you teach them a sanitized, mechanical version of a dance for months, they will dance it a sanitized, mechanical way.
They learn the rules so they can break them later.
You can't just inject soul back into a student after you spent 6 months teaching them that dance is a math equation. Eddie Torres didn't build the Mamo syllabus by stripping the soul out of it. He built it by formalizing the soul that was already there.
Right. But what Eddie Torres did in the 1980s and 90s was revolutionary for its time because it allowed Mambo to be taught at scale. However, the Blue Ocean Strategy text points out that today, the Afro-Latin dance industry is suffering from that exact standardization.
Mostly because the market is saturated. Exactly. And for context, a Blue Ocean strategy is a business concept about creating a completely uncontested market space, a blue ocean, instead of competing in a blood-red ocean full of sharks fighting over the exact same customers.
Right.
Right now, there is immense competition, severe price undercutting, and a stagnant pool of students. Instructors are essentially teaching the exact same 8 counts they were 30 years ago. Lenga is a blue ocean strategy because it fundamentally changes the value proposition for both the teacher and the student.
By just changing the packaging?
No, by utilizing modularity. An instructor can take a single dance element, multiply it by changing the hand position, then multiply it again by changing the rotational direction, and then apply it to a different music genre. Financially and pedagogically, the instructor is creating infinite value from a finite set of mechanics.
Infinite variations, maybe?
And the student is actually learning the underlying physics of how a dance works, rather than just memorizing a cover song.
But infinite variations of a mechanical movement do not equal infinite value if the movement lacks organic meaning. And this brings us right back to the physical reality of the social dance floor. The text claims that traditional teaching causes followers to blindly anticipate moves because they've memorized the sequences in class.
Which they absolutely do. I mean, every leader knows the feeling of a follower backstepping before you've even initiated the lead.
Yes, anticipation is a known issue. But Lenga's solution is to constantly switch elements and play with the transitions so the follower can literally never guess what's coming next.
Keeps them on their toes.
While that sounds great in theory, if you've ever been on a crowded, fast-paced social floor, you know that a degree of predictability is actually safety. It provides comfort.
Comfort can lead to boredom, though.
But if a leader is constantly throwing modular, unpredictable transitions at a follower just to prove how eclectic and unpredictable they are, it doesn't feel like a conversation, it feels like an interrogation.
That's a bit extreme.
There is a physiological reason traditional patterns evolved the way they did. They flow naturally with the human body's momentum. A traditional cross-body lead feels good because it resolves physical tension in a natural, expected way. Chopping it up into unpredictable modules constantly disrupts that kinetic satisfaction.
Okay, I hear the argument about interrogation versus conversation, but Lenga doesn't advocate for chaotic unpredictability. It advocates for adaptability.
It's a fine line.
Let's go back to that crowded floor scenario. If you're listening and you've ever frozen up because someone bumped into you mid-sequence, this is exactly what Lenga is trying to solve.
Well, you just reset.
But a traditional dancer who only knows a full 6-element sequence panics when that bump interrupts the pattern. They have to stop, apologize, and restart on the next one count. A modular dancer simply uses the momentum of the bump to transition into a new module that fits the spatial reality they are now in.
Assuming they have the reflexes for it.
Because they deeply understand spatial orientation, whether a move is linear, circular, or three-dimensional. Because they practice the exact entry and exit points of each module through loops, they can seamlessly exit a ruined sequence safely. That adaptability makes them a vastly better, safer partner on a crowded floor than someone rigidly executing a pattern.
Adaptability is crucial, yes, but I still maintain that the traditional method, with its holistic sequences, teaches adaptability organically.
Organically, meaning slowly and painfully.
No, meaning you learn to navigate a crowded floor by organically repeating sequences on a crowded floor, feeling where the momentum naturally breaks rather than through clinical deconstruction in a classroom. You learn the social floor by being social, not by studying a flowchart of transitions.
But if the classroom doesn't prepare you with the precise tools to navigate that floor, the floor just becomes a place of anxiety. And you know, that is exactly why adult learners quit. The emotional barrier, as the Super Mario effect research shows, is the sheer fear of looking foolish. Lenga mitigates that fear by providing a highly structured, scalable framework where you only level up when your procedural memory is truly ready.
Well, we may just have to accept that we view the purpose of the classroom differently. I view the studio as a cultural immersion space where you absorb the flavor and flow of the history.
And I view it as a kinetic laboratory where the mechanics of connection are isolated and perfected.
Exactly. But looking at the ultimate aims laid out in the texts, it is easy to see the profound merits in both perspectives.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we pull all this together, my core takeaway is that the modular, gamified approach of Dance Lenga aligns perfectly with the true improvisational nature of the Afro Latin social dance floor.
Right.
By prioritizing a deep mechanical understanding of transitions, pushing for musical adaptability across genres, and ensuring long-term retention through looping drills, it creates dancers who don't just recite a rehearsed choreography. It creates dancers who truly speak the underlying kinetic language. It prioritizes deep, long-term mastery over quick, superficial memorization.
And I hear that, but I still land on the side of traditional sequences. The traditional fixed pattern method remains vital because it offers immediate practical application and joy.
Which is important.
It maintains the crucial flow, the momentum, and the original cultural styling of the dance forms from the very first hour. It provides a holistic framework that gives beginners the immediate confidence they need to feel successful, ensuring they actually keep returning to the community while honoring the deep legacy of pioneers like Eddie Torres.
Yet reading through these extensive manuals, there is a profound point of convergence we can both celebrate. Both pedagogical approaches ultimately serve the exact same higher purpose.
Combating loneliness.
Yes, the Lenga philosophy explicitly states that the goal is to foster a healthy global social dance community. It positions partner dancing as a vital physical tool to combat the modern epidemic of loneliness and societal polarization.
And I couldn't agree more with that mission. The text notes that bridging our differences on the dance floor brings humanity literally and figuratively closer together. And purely on a technical level, I think any traditional instructor out there would agree with Lenga's core premise that understanding the transitions between moves is fundamentally important to partner dancing.
Even if we deeply disagree on how clinically those transitions should be taught.
Exactly.
Right, it brings us back to that language metaphor we started with. Are you best served by being handed a dictionary of the most useful, beautiful phrases so you can immediately pull up a chair and join the conversation at the dinner table?
Or are you better off spending the time studying the syntax, the verbs, and the grammar blocks so that eventually you can write your own novel?
It's the profound difference between speaking a language and understanding its underlying architecture. Both have immense value depending on the student's ultimate goals and their tolerance for the learning curve.
Very well said.
And that is where we will leave it for you, the listener, to form your own conclusion. Does deconstructed modularity or holistic traditional patterning offer the best path to mastering the beautiful art of connection?
There are even more layers of musicality, physical inclusivity, and cultural history to explore in these materials.
Until next time, keep exploring the nuances of the conversation.